Everybody, it's that time of year again, January, and your 1099s are due to your vendors at the end of the month. Today, we're going to talk about how to do this within Sage Intacct. As part of this presentation, we're going to first go through viewing and editing vendors 1099 status within the system. And then we're going to talk about if this is your first year in Intacct, how to do that and those extra steps to get those vendor opening balances in. And we're going to run some 1099 reports to review the information that's within the system. And then if there's information missing, we can look how to find and reclassify 1099 amounts. And after that, we'll be ready to generate and print the 1099s. At the very end, we're going to talk about some third-party options that are out there to make this process even easier. So let's start with viewing a vendor's 1099 status. To do this, we're going to create a custom view within the vendor list to be able to easily identify and see the 1099 vendors that are available and to edit to make the information accurate. As part of editing, we have the ability to edit type, the 1099 name and contact information, as well as be able to update information in the system that may be outdated because of an old or missing 1099 form type. And so from here, we're going to go into the system and do both those items. So I'm going to start at the home page here, and then I'm going to navigate to the vendor list, going through accounts payable and then to vendors. And so mine is already defaulted to that 1099 list we're going to build. So for you, this may be one of your other views. To create this new list, though, you're going to come to Manage Views up here, and you're going to select Create New. I'm going to go and select Edit so I can show you what's in this view. And this first page is it's view where you'll select the columns that you want to display on the view. I have the vendor ID, vendor name, and then the tax and 1099 information. I also, in mine, I'm using the display contact information, which is just information on that first page of the vendor card. This is how I'm tracking the address for my vendors. Yours may be different if you actually have specific contacts for 1099 information. You may want to use this contact information down here to bring in this address information for that screen. Once you have your column selected, you're going to press Next, and this will bring you to the column sequence. And from here, you'll identify how you want the columns to go in order on the actual list view, and you can do that by clicking and dragging. Once that's set, you then go to the next page where we can do the filters. I don't have any filters on my list. You can filter to only show 1099 vendors if you wanted to by going to the form box and then doing greater vendor equal to 1. Since all your 1099 vendors should have a form box selected, I'm not going to have a filter, so we're going to take that off. Press Next, and then this will determine how your results sort. I was sorting mine by the form 1099 type. You could do it by any one of those. Choose how you want to sort it. You can click and drag the column you want to sort by, and then choose ascending or descending. And then from here, you're going to save a name and save your list. Mine's called 1099 vendors. And then you can choose whether or not to deploy, which means other users can see and possibly edit if they have permissions your report, or if you leave it unselected, only you can see and edit this view. So once you're done with all that, you're going to press Save. And then it'll bring you back to the vendor list, but by default, it'll bring you to whatever list you had been on when you went to create the list. So you'll want to come up here on the caret and click on your new list that was just created, and that'll generate your new list view. So from here, we can actually look at what vendors are being generated or are going to have 1099s generated for them, and we can edit them as needed from here. So let's say let's say this is the wrong miscellaneous, it should be NEC. We came into Amanda Workman, press Edit. You come down here and you could then click that Form 1099 and change this to NEC. I'm not going to save this because I'm actually going to use this for another example later. But at this point, then you would just save it, and it would update once you save the vendor. I did not save that one. If you have other vendors, or maybe you need to actually add the vendor in, you could do that here. Some meal printing should be 1099 vendor, and it wasn't picked up during the vendor import or throughout the year. So you can press edit on meal printing, go up to the additional information page here, and then you could, if they have maybe a different 1099 name, you could enter that here. Oops. A tax ID, you're probably gonna want that to be able to submit the 1099, and then from here we're going to select 1099 form. Let's say this is an NEC. Select the box here and then press. One other thing I think was missing on this vendor was an address, and as I said before, on my list and on my 1099s, the addresses are being pulled from here. So if we put an address in here, and that will show up both on that list view we'd created and the 1099. Other people might be using this contact list instead. You have a specific contact for the 1099, and you would put this contact in here, and then you would say this is 1099, and you would select that as your 1099 vendor. I'm not going to do that here. All right, so once this is all saved, you press save here. And so if there are transactions already in here for this vendor, this new screen is going to pop up. And this screen, actually bring this in a little bit. This screen is going to ask you what you want to do with those old transactions. So when reading these options, so keep in mind that 2022 is the current year. So if we select this top option, it'll only update the transactions in 2022 for that vendor and ignore 2021, which is the year we're trying to submit 1099s for. If we select the second option, this will update transactions for both 2022 and 2021 for this vendor. If we select don't update previous transactions, it will not get that 1099 flag to any of the old transactions, and will allow you to either go back and manually decide what you want to do with them or ignore them if they aren't 1099 eligible. For this one, we're going to go ahead and select update all transactions. So that way this vendor will show up in the report later when we do that. Press save, and then all that saves in the background, and now it's part of the 1099 list. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. So next we're going to talk about, this is your first year doing 1099s in Sage Intacct and what extra steps that's going to entail. For most people, when they go live in Intacct, they're not going live on one-to-one, so they have some vendor open balances that need to be brought in Intacct so they can do their full 1099 process within a system instead of two different systems. And there's two ways to do this. There's, if it's only a handful of vendors that maybe need to have opening balances entered, this can be done manually in a UI, which is shown on the left side of the screen there. And then if there's a large list of vendors that need to be added, then we could do a vendor open balance import on Excel spreadsheet, which there's an example on the right side of the screen there. And we're actually going to go ahead and do this within the system to show you how that works. If I bring back over our system we're at, we're actually going to do it again from the vendor list page if we want to do it manually. So maybe with email printing, there was actually an open balance we wanted to put in for 2021. We press edit, go back to where we were before, we'd go back to form 1099. And then in this initial value for year would change that to 2021. It's going to default to the current year. Would select the box that requires that amount, and then would put in the amount that was from the legacy system that's missing and Intacct. And this is going to be a bulk amount that shows up on the 1099 to make it accurate. And then would press save. And that's all you do. So if there's only a handful of vendors, it can be easily done within the system. Otherwise, you're going to want to use this spreadsheet. I only have one vendor filled out in here, but you would fill this out for each vendor that needs to be updated, and this could be an export maybe from your legacy system. With the Intacct vendor ID, the name is not required, but you put it in for reference. And then the form type, form box, and then the actual opening balance amount. And once you have this Excel spreadsheet filled out, to import it, you would need to be an admin to do this part. to have an admin come into the company to the import data, and then you'd scroll down to accounts payable and go to the vendor 1099 opening balances, select import. And then here you're going to select the year, the initial value, or the initial the year's initial values, just like we did in the manual part. You select 2021, you grab your CSV import, and then you press import, and that would bring it into those vendors just like we did manually. If you need help with this, especially if you're a first-year client, feel free to contact us, and we can easily help you get through these steps. Okay, so let's go back to our PowerPoint presentation, because next we're going to talk about running 1099 reports in the system. And to do that, which once again in the accounts payable, and in that 1099, 1096 list there, then you have the 1099 reports. And this is a step of how to get there. I'm actually going to show you though in the system as well. So let me bring this back over and navigate away from where we were back into accounts payable, 1099s, and 1099 reports. And there are a lot of options in here to keep in mind. For one, it defaults to the current year. So you're going to want to make sure you change this to the year you actually want to report on for 1099s. And these dates will always override any options up here in the reporting period. So you can ignore this unless you really, unless you want to actually erase these and use this instead. Then you have the option either select all vendors, or if you only wanted to look at one or two, you could unselect this and select from your vendor list to report on only certain vendors. We're going to do all vendors. If you're doing employee reimbursements, if you have a time and expense module and have employees that might have 1099s, you could change this. If you don't, you can ignore it. Grouping by, you can choose either group by vendors, 1099 category, or none. I'm going to leave mine at vendors. And then the important part, if the first time you're running this, you'll want to make sure you select the form 1099 type. And that's in here. You could select them all. It's only going to show you the ones that actually have values, but you need at least the ones you need. The first time you run this, it's going to be blank, but then it'll remember your selection going forward. And on transaction information, you can either show all transactions throughout the year for all vendors, show only transactions that have 1099 flags, or show non-1099 transactions if maybe you're looking for one that's missing a 1099 flag. We're going to stick with only 1099 for now. And then you have the option to show only minimum eligible amounts, so you don't see any vendors that don't meet the threshold for 1099 filing. Down here is detail or summary. Detail allows you to see every transaction that is part of that vendor's transaction list. Summary only shows the totals for each vendor. And then you can choose what to do with your credit card payments in the screen, whether exclude them if you check the box, or include them if you leave it unchecked. So we're going to go ahead and view the option that I've selected here. And this is shown, and so this is grouping it by vendor with ABC Supplies, which is that one. Lee Meal, we have 30,000, just that that amount that we put in as an initial balance. And then same with Martin Electric, there's an initial balance in there. And then we have multiple transactions for these other vendors. And you're able to drill down the transactions by pressing here. We're going to get more into that in a few minutes. So a few reporting considerations to remember when running these reports. The Intacct defaults the current year. Be sure to change this before running. Be sure to select all form types you want to run the first time you run it, otherwise you're not going to get any results. Choose to run only 1099 for all transactions if you're just wanting to see the 1099 transactions. If not, you can change that selection. Then you want to make sure you choose how to handle your credit card payments. And you're going to want to decide the group vendor or 1099 category if desired, or you can do none. It's another option. And then you can run the report as a detail view to see individual transactions, or in a summary view to see totals per vendor. So now you know how to run a report. We're able to now find and reclassify missing 1099 amounts. And we're going to use that same report to do that, and we can change the parameters in order to find transactions that might actually be missing from it. We're going to go back into the system and show you how to do that. So if we customize the report and said only look for one vendor, so let's say maybe I didn't think Amanda Workman's amounts looked accurate. Oops, here we go. So I'm only going to run it for her. I'm going to go ahead and run all 1099 types. But if you're here, so I'm going to show all. So I'll see all her transactions. I want to definitely do detail. So I want to see each transaction there. And then current there for 2021, and then press view. And so we're going to see is a list first of all the 1099 transactions, and then any that might be missing. So we have one transaction. It looks like somehow that box got missed and isn't showing up on the or won't show up on the 1099 when it's created. So from here, we'll drill down to the bill itself, and we can definitely verify when we scroll down that this box is not clicked. But we have the ability to reclassify this to make sure it's on the 1099. To do this, though, you're going to want to make two things are going to want to be turned on in your system. And these can be, if they're not turned on now, they can be turned on temporarily to make these changes and then turned off again. But the first one is you're going to want to be able to reclassify AP bills. And that's this button here. If you don't do this button after pressing edit, it means you do not have Reclassify on. It'll need to be turned on in your AP configuration. So you'll want to contact either your admin or your consultant to get that turned on if it's needed. Once you press Reclassify, the other thing that'll need to be turned on if it's not is being able to do 1099 override. And it gives you the ability to select this box once you press Reclassify. This is grayed out. It means you have it turned off. And once again, it will need to be turned on within the AP configuration. And your admin or consultant can do that for you. And then you can turn it back off again afterward. So once we do that, press Post. And it's been automatically added to the 1099 list and will show up now on the 1099 when it's generated. And that is how you finally reclassify missing amounts. Go back to our slides. So now we're ready to generate and print our 1099s. And there are a couple of options to do that. The first option is to print from Intacct to paper. And that'll be that 1099 form that's highlighted on the top there. And that will give you a PDF. It generates a PDF, then prints to a pre-formatted 1099 paper. And then it can be sent out by paper, by mail that way, or scanned back in the email to their vendors. Then the other option is what's called a 1099 rate file. And this creates this CSV file or an Excel file. If you wanted to instead do an electronic option, such as an e-file, or you can use that to send to third parties to do the filing for you or other data manipulations there. So let's show you how to run those forms in Intacct. Back to accounts payable, back to the 1099 list, and so we'll do the form first. And we'll need to do it by form type. So we're going to first have 2021 as the year. We're going to select all vendors. And then let's do NEC. So if you have NEC and miscellaneous, when you first need to do it for NEC and then come back to do miscellaneous. We're going to go ahead and have it go by vendor name. Since the ID may not mean anything to the vendor, and we'll exclude the vendor IDs from the report. And from here, we'll press print. And it gives us a PDF with the basic 1099 information that should print just fine on that 1099 pre-formatted paper. If you buy from Intacct, there should be no problems with it matching up. If you don't, there might need to be adjustments made to the printing format. There are alignments, and you can do those down here. But these are set for any forms ordered from Intacct itself. Now the other option is the create file. So then we can go back to there, and then this bottom one, 1099 create file. And once again, exact same window. NEC, we'll do ahead, we'll do vendor name again. And then you can export. So if you're sending it to a third party, you're most likely going to want to do CSV. Download the file. Make it download, and then it should show up as a CSV. So come over here, and that's how it comes out of the system. And then you can do whatever you need to do with it to get it filed. And that's how you generate the reports and forms in Intacct for 1099s. So lastly, we're going to go over some third-party options that are available for 1099s, and what these can do, what third-party options can help with is easily create, verify, and file your 1099 forms from the information from Intacct. It can import 10 qualified vendors and payments from Sage Intacct. It can handle federal and state compliant e-filing. They are able to you can outsource printing and mailing of the 1099s to third parties. Most of them provide 24/7 support. You can collect W-9 forms from your vendors online, as well as enable vendors to update and e-sign their forms. And then also provide a TIN matching service to compare the information provided to the IRS. And there are definitely a number of third parties out there. And if you're interested in this option, please let us know and we can get you set up with some demos and more information on what third parties might be the best fit for you and your team. And that concludes our presentation today on how to do 1099s in Sage Intacct. And thank you for listening and watching, and good luck out there with your 1099s.